You know, every society needs a final authority, right? A supreme court where the buck stops. But what if that ultimate judge wasn't a person or even a court at all? We're about to explore how ancient Israel thought about its highest legal authority. And believe me, the answer is pretty surprising. Think about it. It's a question that we still ask today. What happens when earthly justice just fails? When the evidence isn't there, when the people in charge are corrupt, or when there's literally no one you can turn to for a fair hearing? Where do you go? What's your final appeal? Well, for the ancient Israelites, the answer to that question was crystal clear, and it ran through their entire culture. When every human system broke down, there was one final, absolute appeal that could be made. And that appeal, it went straight to Yahweh. He was seen as more than just a deity. He was the judge par excellence, the actual source of all law, and the perfect model of how justice should work. So let's see how this idea actually played out in real life. Okay, our first example takes us way out of any formal courthouse. We're looking at a really personal, bitter family dispute between two guys, Jacob and Laban. And it shows us exactly how this belief in a divine judge worked on the ground day to day. So after a huge argument, they decide to make a pact. But the problem is, neither of them trusts the other one bit. So Laban says this, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other." Now, this isn't just some nice, polite thing to say. This is a formal legal appeal. What Laban is doing here is calling on the concept of a divine witness. And this isn't a witness who shows up in court to testify, no. This is God himself being called in to act as a kind of supernatural sentry, an overseer who guarantees the whole agreement when no person possibly could. So get this, even though they had their relatives right there acting as a kind of earthly court to sort things out, both Jacob and Laban knew it wasn't enough. They specifically called on Yahweh to be the guarantor for those times when they were, and this is the key phrase, hidden from each other, when no human could possibly see what was happening. Their oath wasn't just a promise to each other, it was a binding contract with God. Okay, so that's a personal dispute. But what happens when you're dealing with something way more serious? Like a crime that's impossible to solve. What happens when human justice doesn't just fall short, but hits an absolute dead end? The law in Deuteronomy paints a really chilling picture. Imagine this. If someone is found slain, lying in the open country, and it is not known who struck him, that's the ultimate ancient cold case. You've got no witnesses, no suspects, and zero evidence. What on earth do you do? Well, you perform this very specific and very solemn ritual. The elders from the closest town have to step up and claim liability. They carry out a symbolic act with a heifer, then they wash their hands over it and publicly declare, "We are innocent." And the final step? They appeal directly to God to clear the community of the blood guilt. It's a totally formal legal procedure, but the courtroom, well, it isn't of this world. And this just perfectly illustrates the whole idea. The point of this entire ceremony wasn't to try and find the killer. Human methods had already failed. The whole thing was a direct legal appeal to the ultimate judge, the only one who actually knew the truth, asking him to decide the case and grant the community absolution. Okay, so if that's how they handled unsolvable cases from the ground up, what about from the top down? Let's look at the highest seat of earthly power, the king. Turns out, even he was seen as just a divine surrogate on the throne of justice. You see, the king's power was never considered his own. Just look at the language they used. King David's ability to discern a case was compared to that of an angel of God. When Solomon made a ruling, it was seen as the very wisdom of God. And when King Jehoshaphat appointed new judges, he told them straight up, "You're not judging for humans, you're judging as God's surrogates." All their authority came from somewhere else. This line from the prophet Isaiah just sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? It takes all the big functions of government, judge, lawgiver, king, and says, you know who really holds these titles? Yahweh. He's the true ruler. The king on earth is just his representative. So we've seen this from the perspective of the powerful. But what did this all mean for the average person, especially for the vulnerable, the people who were so often let down by human systems? Well, for them, this belief became a really profound source of hope. The book of Psalms is just filled with this idea. Take this verse. "Father of orphans and protector of widows is God." This actually casts God in a specific legal role. For the people who had no one on earth to fight for them, God himself became their ultimate legal defender. And this wasn't some vague, abstract idea. It was a deeply personal cry for help. An individual who felt they'd been wronged would appeal directly to God, saying something like, "Vindicate me in your righteousness, O Lord my God." It's like they were filing a lawsuit directly in the highest court imaginable. So for ordinary people, this idea of divine justice was a massive comfort. Unlike human judges who make mistakes, God's justice was seen as constant, ever-flowing. It was always true, always fair, and most importantly, it never overlooked the powerless. And it was believed that, in the end, it would fix the injustices of the world. So, when you pull it all together, here's the main takeaway. This belief in a divine ultimate judge wasn't just some small part of their legal system. No, it was the foundational, unifying principle of the whole thing. It connected everything from a private promise between two suspicious relatives to a strange ritual for an unsolved murder, all the way up to the decrees coming from the king's throne. And all of this leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for our own time. In our modern world, with our own complicated and, let's be honest, imperfect legal systems, what serves as our ultimate judge? When the system fails us, where do we put our final hope for justice? Definitely something to think about.